Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Margaret, and at 68 years old, I'm about to tell you the most satisfying revenge story that proves you're never too old to fight back against abuse. For 5 long years, my daughter-in-law, Jessica, systematically abused me, stole from me, and tried to isolate me from my own son while everyone thought she was the perfect caring daughter-in-law, taking care of her elderly. But here's where this old lady showed everyone what real wisdom looks like. I spent 2 years secretly documenting Jessica's abuse, financial theft, and manipulation. When I finally revealed everything at my son's 40th birthday party in front of 60 family members and friends, Jessica lost her marriage, her reputation, her job, and her freedom. Oh, and that inheritance she thought she was going to get. Every penny went to charity instead. This story has everything: elder abuse, financial theft, family manipulation, and the kind of revenge that only comes from decades of life experience, and the patience to plan the perfect takedown. Y'all ready to see what happens when you mess with the wrong grandmother? Because this is how a 68-year-old woman destroyed her abusive daughter-in-law's entire life. Beautiful souls. Let me take you back to 7 years ago when my son David brought home Jessica Martinez, the woman who would become my daughter-in-law, and the person who would make my golden years into a nightmare. I'm Margaret Thompson, 68 years old, and I've lived a full life. I raised 3 children as a single mother after my husband passed away when I was 45. My son David is my youngest, and he's always been the apple of my eye, a successful engineer who owns his own consulting firm and has always been devoted to his family. When David introduced me to Jessica, she seemed absolutely perfect. Jessica was 29, worked as a nurse at the local hospital, and appeared to be everything a mother could want for her son: caring, professional, and genuinely interested in family relationships. "Mrs. Thompson, I've heard so much about you," Jessica said during our first meeting. "David talks about you constantly. I can't wait to get to know the woman who raised such an amazing man." Jessica was attentive, respectful, and seemed genuinely interested in my stories about David's childhood and our family history. During their 2-year courtship, Jessica would visit me regularly, bring me flowers, even help me with grocery shopping and household tasks when I mentioned having some mobility issues with my arthritis. David and Jessica got married 5 years ago, in a beautiful ceremony where Jessica made sure to include me in all the planning and even asked me to give a speech about welcoming her to our family. "Margaret, you're not just getting a daughter-in-law. You're getting a daughter," Jessica said during her wedding speech. "I promise to love and care for David the way you taught him to love and care for others." After the wedding, Jessica suggested that I sell my house and move in with them since I was living alone and they had plenty of space in their 4-bedroom home. "We want to make sure you're safe and comfortable as you get older," Jessica explained. "Plus, David would love to have you closer, okay? And I could help with anything you need." The suggestion seemed caring and practical. I was 63, dealing with some health issues, and the idea of being closer to family was appealing. I sold my house of 30 years and moved into David and Jessica's guest room, bringing my life savings of $280,000 from the house sale, plus my retirement funds. Initially, the living arrangement seemed perfect. Jessica would check on me regularly, help with my medications, and make sure I was included in family activities. About 6 months after I moved in, Jessica's behavior toward me began to change, in subtle ways that I initially attributed to normal adjustment stress. Jessica started making small comments about my habits and routines. "Margaret, could you try to keep your bathroom supplies more organized? I like the house to look neat when we have guests." She'd also make suggestions about my daily activities. "Maybe you should spend more time in your room, reading instead of watching TV in the living room. David and I need some privacy when he gets home from work." Jessica began controlling my access to common areas of the house, establishing quiet times when I was expected to stay in my room, so she and David could have couple time. When I'd mentioned feeling isolated or excluded, Jessica would respond with fake concern. "Oh, Margaret, I'm so sorry if you feel that way. I'm just trying to maintain a healthy marriage." I'm sure you understand how important that is. Jessica also started managing my daily schedule, insisting on organizing my doctor appointments, grocery shopping, and social activities. I want to make sure you're safe and not overexerting yourself, Jessica would say. Let me handle these things so you can focus on resting and enjoying your retirement. About a year after moving in, Jessica convinced me to let her help manage my finances, claiming it would be easier to coordinate household expenses and my care costs. Margaret, it would be so much simpler if we combined some of your accounts with ours, Jessica suggested. That way, I can pay for your medications, doctor visits, and personal expenses without you having to worry about writing checks or managing multiple accounts. Jessica's nursing background made her suggestions about my health and financial needs seem credible and caring. I agreed to add Jessica's name to several of my accounts, thinking it would make things more convenient and trusting that she had my best interests at heart. Jessica also suggested that I update my will to make things cleaner for estate planning purposes. You should really make sure your legal documents are up to date, Jessica advised. David is going to inherit everything anyway. But having clear paperwork will make things easier when the time comes. I updated my will to leave most of my estate to David, with Jessica as the executor, thinking I was making things simpler for my family. Over the following months, Jessica began systematically isolating me from my friends, other family members, and social activities. She'd schedule my medical appointments during times when my friends had planned to visit, then apologize for the unavoidable conflicts. I'm so sorry, Margaret, but the doctor could only see you at 2 p.m. on Tuesday. And I know that's when your friend Ellen usually visits. Health has to come first, though. Jessica also started monitoring my phone calls and mail, claiming she was helping me stay organized and avoid scams. There are so many people who try to take advantage of elderly people, Jessica would say. Let me screen your calls and mail to make sure you're protected from fraud. When my friends or other family members would call, Jessica would often answer and explain that I was resting, not feeling well, or too tired for visitors. Jessica began declining social invitations on my behalf without consulting me, telling people that I was having health issues and needed to take things easy. Within 2 years, my social circle had virtually disappeared because people thought I was too ill or uninterested in maintaining relationships. Asterisk, the most heartbreaking aspect of Jessica's abuse was how she manipulated my relationship with my own son. Jessica would report conversations and incidents to David that painted me as confused, difficult, or ungrateful. David, your mother seemed really confused today when I was explaining her medication schedule, Jessica would tell him. I'm worried about her memory. Maybe we should talk to her doctor about cognitive issues. Margaret was quite rude too. Me this morning when I was trying to help her organize her room, Jessica would report. I think the stress of aging is making her more irritable. We might need to consider additional care options. Jessica's reports to David were always framed as concern for my well-being, making her seem like a devoted daughter-in-law who was struggling to care for a difficult elderly woman. David, who worked long hours and trusted his wife completely, began treating me differently based on Jessica's false reports. Mom, Jessica says you've been having some confusion lately, David would say. Are you feeling okay? Maybe we should have the doctor check your medications. David started speaking to me more slowly and carefully, as if I was mentally impaired, because Jessica had convinced him that I was developing cognitive problems. The son who had once valued my opinions and enjoyed our conversations began treating me like a burden who needed to be managed rather than a parent who deserved respect. Asterisk, gorgeous souls. What started as subtle control and manipulation gradually escalated into systematic abuse that made my daily life a nightmare, while Jessica maintained her perfect daughter-in-law image to the outside world. Asterisk, once Jessica had access to my accounts, she began stealing money systematically while disguising the theft as legitimate expenses for my care. Jessica would withdraw large amounts of cash, claiming they were for my medical expenses, prescription, medications, or special equipment I needed for my mobility issues. Margaret needs a new walker, and the insurance doesn't cover the good ones. Jessica would tell David, I'll use some of her savings to get her something that will really help her mobility. Asterisk, but the walker never appeared. And when I'd ask about it, Jessica would claim that the order was delayed or that the doctor had recommended waiting. Jessica also used my credit cards for her personal expenses, then showed me statements claiming the charges were for my care. This $800 charge was for your physical therapy equipment, Jessica would explain, showing me a statement. And this $1,200 was for those special supplements the doctor recommended for your arthritis. I never received any equipment or supplements, but Jessica's explanations were detailed and confident, making me doubt my own memory. Over 2 years, Jessica stole over $85,000 from my accounts through fake medical expenses, fraudulent withdrawals, and personal purchases charged to my credit cards. Jessica's verbal abuse was constant but carefully hidden from David and anyone else who might intervene. When we were alone, Jessica would criticize everything about me, my appearance, my habits, my intelligence, and my value to the family. You know, Margaret, David only tolerates you living here because he feels guilty, Jessica would say. If it were up to him, you'd be in a nursing home where you belong. You're becoming a real burden on our marriage, Jessica would tell me. David and I can't have a normal life with you, constantly needing attention and care. Jessica would also threaten me with nursing home placement if I complained about her treatment. If you keep causing problems, I'll have to convince David that you need professional care, Jessica would warn. I have medical training, so my opinion about your capabilities carries a lot of weight with him. Jessica's psychological manipulation was sophisticated and cruel. It's designed to make me feel worthless and completely dependent on her supposed generosity. As Jessica's confidence grew, she began physically neglecting and occasionally abusing me. Jessica would forget to give me my medications, claiming she was too busy with work and household responsibilities. I can't be expected to remember everything Margaret, Jessica would say when I'd mention missing medications. You're going to have to take more responsibility for your own care. But Jessica had taken control of all my medications and medical supplies, making it impossible for me to manage my own care. Jessica would also withhold food, claiming I was eating too much and needed to watch my weight for health reasons. The doctor said you need to lose weight to help with your arthritis. Jessica would lie. I'm helping you by controlling your portions and snacks. Jessica would lock the kitchen cabinets and refrigerator, giving me only small portions of food and claiming it was for my own good. On several occasions, Jessica pushed me or grabbed my arm roughly when she was angry, always making sure David wasn't around to witness the physical abuse. You fell because you're unsteady on your feet, Jessica would explain if David noticed any bruises. We really need to consider safety modifications in the house. By the 3rd year of living with Jessica, was completely isolated from the outside world. Jessica had convinced my friends and extended family that I was suffering from dementia and was no longer able to maintain normal relationships. Margaret has good days and bad days, Jessica would tell anyone who called. Memory isn't what it used to be, and she gets confused easily. I think it's better if we limit her social interactions to avoid overwhelming her. Jessica had my mail forwarded to a P.O. box that only she could access, claiming it was to protect me from scams and financial fraud. My phone was replaced with one that Jessica controlled, and she would answer all calls, screening them and often telling callers that I was unavailable or not having a good day. Jessica also convinced David that my complaints about her treatment were symptoms of mental decline and paranoia. Your mother has been making some strange accusations lately, Jessica would tell David. She claims I'm stealing from her or being mean to her, but I think her memory issues are making her confused about what's really happening. David, who trusted his wife and saw her working hard to care for me, began dismissing my concerns as signs of cognitive impairment. What Jessica didn't know was that 6 months into her abuse, I had become suspicious enough to start documenting what was happening to me. Using money from a small savings account that Jessica didn't know about, I purchased several small hidden cameras and audio recording devices. I was careful to place them in areas where Jessica's abuse typically occurred: my bedroom, the kitchen, and the living room where she would verbally assault me when David wasn't home. For 18 months, I secretly recorded Jessica's theft, abuse, and manipulation while pretending to be the confused, helpless, elderly woman she wanted everyone to believe I was. The recordings captured Jessica stealing money from my purse, verbally abusing me, withholding my medications, and even physically pushing me on multiple occasions. I also recorded Jessica's phone conversations, where she would laugh about my situation with her friends and talk about the inheritance she expected to receive when I died. Margaret probably has another 5 years left, Max, Jessica said. In one recorded phone call, David will inherit everything, which means I'll finally have access to all that money she's been hoarding. The hidden cameras also captured Jessica forging my signature on checks and using my credit cards for personal purchases. While enduring Jessica's daily abuse, I spent my time organizing the evidence and planning my revenge. I created detailed logs of every incident, matching dates and times with the recorded evidence. I also researched elder abuse laws and worked with a legal aid attorney who specialized in cases involving financial exploitation of elderly people. My attorney, Patricia Williams, was horrified by the scope of Jessica's abuse and confident that we had evidence for both criminal charges and civil litigation. Margaret, what you've documented is systematic elder abuse, financial theft, and potentially criminal neglect, Patricia explained. Jessica could face serious prison time for what she's done to you. Patricia helped me develop a plan to expose Jessica's abuse in a way that would maximize legal consequences and ensure that David would finally see the truth about his wife. We decided to reveal everything at David's 40th birthday party, where Jessica would be surrounded by family and friends who had believed her lies about being a devoted caregiver. Beautiful souls. David's 40th birthday party became the stage for the most satisfying exposure of an abuser I've ever witnessed. Jessica thought she was attending a celebration where she'd be praised for her devotion to her elderly mother-in-law. Instead, she was about to be exposed as a criminal in front of everyone she'd fooled. David's 40th birthday party was planned for Saturday evening at their house, with about 60 guests, including family members, work colleagues, neighbors, and old friends. Jessica had spent weeks planning the party, presenting herself as the perfect wife who was organizing a beautiful celebration for her husband while also caring for his elderly mother. "I just want David to have the most amazing birthday," Jessica told guests as they arrived. "It's been challenging caring for Margaret while planning this party, but family comes first." Jessica made sure to mention my supposed health issues. Two guests, painting herself as a selfless daughter-in-law who was sacrificing her own comfort to care for me. "Margaret has been having some difficult days lately," Jessica would tell people, "but I'm committed to making sure she feels loved and included in our family celebrations." Throughout the early part of the party, Jessica was the picture of concern and devotion, checking on me and making sure I was comfortable in front of all the guests. "How are you feeling, Margaret?" Jessica would ask loudly enough for others to hear. "Do you need anything? I want to make sure you're enjoying David's party." About an hour into the party, David asked if anyone wanted to give speeches celebrating his birthday and reflecting on their relationships with him. Several friends and family members gave touching speeches about David's character, his professional success, and his devotion to family. Jessica gave an emotional speech about what a wonderful husband David was and how grateful she was to be part of his family. "David is the most caring, generous man I know," Jessica said tearfully. "He's shown me what it means to love unconditionally, and I'm so grateful that he welcomed me into his family and trusted me to care for the people he loves most." Jessica's speech received enthusiastic applause from guests who were moved by her apparent devotion and sacrifice. Then David asked if I wanted to say something for his birthday. "Mom, would you like to share some thoughts about my 40 years?" David asked. I know everyone would love to hear from you. This was the moment I'd been planning for months. I stood up with a folder in my hands and addressed the room full of people who had believed Jessica's lies about my mental state and her caregiving. Thank you all for being here to celebrate my son David's birthday, I began. David means the world to me, and that's why I need to share some important information about what's been happening in our family. Jessica looked nervous, but probably assumed I was going to give some rambling speech that would support her claims about my cognitive decline. For the past 3 years, my daughter-in-law, Jessica, has been systematically abusing me, stealing from me, and lying to all of you about my mental and physical condition.